So the Happy Baby slipcover construction is going to be a multi-part series. And that's just because I want to give you as much detail as possible, but also give you the option to skip around to where you actually want to watch. So the first video is going to be about cutting your fabric, adding interfacing, and stuff like that. Then we're going to skip to the second video where we're going to start with the construction. The construction may be more than one video just to make it easy for you to find the information you need. Making the slipcover is not actually difficult. I just wanted to give you as much detail as possible so that if you get confused or need help, you have that video available to you 24 hours a day. So check out the multi-part series to figure out where you need the information, or watch them all for the fun of it. So our first step here is to do a quick check that you have all your pieces. So now it's time to get all these parts together. We have our center that we've already assembled with a hole in the zipper. We have our sides, and we have the two facing pieces. So our first step is going to be sew the facing to the side. So we're going to line that up, and you're going to sew all of this part that doesn't have serging on it in mind. So it's going to be the top edge where the strap is, the side where the snaps go, and this little piece here, which is for the side strap. That is what you're going to sew to that bigger side piece. And you're going to do that on both sides. Okay, I've sewn around all the edges here of the facing to the side piece. Note this part down here is left open because this is going to be in this seam. So the next thing we need to do is clipping so we can turn it. We have these corners here that definitely need to be clipped. Up here at the top, there's this little curve here that definitely could use a triangle piece cut out, and right along this curve here needs clips as well. So to do the triangle cutout, you can just clip in two different directions, and this needs like maybe one on either side of this. You can also just use pinking shears on the whole thing. You don't have to actually do clipping. You can just take the pinking shears and go along where you would be doing clipping. So instead of clipping the seam, just take the pinking shears and go along it. But I'm going to show you how to do it without the pinking shears, and you're still going to have to clip the corners anyway. So here's a corner. Actually, let's just go over to this one. Nothing's really been done to it, so you don't get confused by this. So if you don't have pinking shears, you're going to want to take a couple of little triangles out of the top here. That's because there's this curve, and we want it, the fabric that's in the seam line was going to be doing this when it goes the other way. So we want to take out that extra so it easily curves. Now the opposite is true here. This needs to get bigger in the seam allowance so it can open well. So we need to give it the ability to open by clipping it. These are straight parts, so they really don't need anything done to the seam allowance, but we do need to take care of the corner. And because of the angle it's at, that's what I'm going to do for the corner. Because generally you would just chop across the corner, but everything's at a weird angle here because it's not an exact corner. So that's why I just like taking those two different chunks out of it, making it so there's not much bulk at either of these corners while you're trying to turn them. So let's go back to the one that we just did that on and finish taking care of the corners. There we go. And now we need to turn these right side out. Just flip here. I like putting my finger inside here and pushing. And now we're going to go and iron this, because the next thing I'm doing is putting in the invisible snaps, and we're not going to have a chance to iron this again. Once the invisible snaps are in, it's just too risky to iron over this area. So now is the chance to do it. These two pieces are now beautifully ironed. So it's time to put in our invisible snaps. If you're doing visible snaps, you can also just do them now, but the invisible ones are the ones that you really need to do now. So I check inside here, I have those dots where my snaps go. And that's where we're going to be putting them in. And you may be curious, if I'm turning this kind of inside out to get to the snaps, why didn't I put in the snaps before I sewed it? Well, that's because it's really hard to get close to the edge of the snaps, and we are trying to get those snaps literally right up to the very edge here. So we definitely needed to do the seam first. I am going to use black cam snaps. Size 20 snaps are what I use because it's what I have. You can, I wouldn't suggest using anything bigger, but you could certainly use smaller, or sew-on snaps could certainly go on later. You could also put velcro in this area, but you do need to make sure you move it back from the edge so that there's no chance of the rough edge really rubbing on your arm or your baby's. So I got it right up to that edge there, as close as possible. Now I've already done the other side here. You can see how that looks. So I need to put the opposite part on. I have studs on here, so sockets will need to go on this side so that they will be able to connect. I have the snaps done on both sides. It's the perfect time to check to make sure everything is working before you go any farther. Awesome. So now that I know that everything is working with the snaps, it is time to actually attach these to the main body. Let me show you this one so you know where we're headed, so you understand why I'm telling you to do certain things. So let's look at the seam allowances, where they're going. So this seam allowance is going this way, and that's because the end of the zipper needs to go this way. Because folding a zipper back on itself is a lot of bunchiness and too much thickness. So we need the zipper to continue out into the seam allowance. So these seam allowances are going that way with the zipper. But the facing's seam allowance is going towards the center. It's covering up all of that bulkiness here and creating a nice, beautiful seam at the top. But the other thing that it's doing, if you flip it around to the front, it's actually taking a fold in this headrest piece. So when we're sewing the top of the headrest here, we're going to end up bumping right into there. So right here, everything comes together. The strap part comes together, the headrest part comes together, and right here in this one area is a lot of bulk. And you still have to be able to sew those headrests over together with that, all that bulk right here. So we're going to do things in a very particular order to give us the absolute best chance of being able to easily sew this area. So work with me here and I'll show you how to get it done. So we have to get the black one into the condition of the white one. So we know that this side goes here and this side, the other side goes over there. We're going to flip it this way. Then we're going to pull this out of the way. So we're going to be sewing this piece to our body, not the facing. Now we're going to come up here, open up the facing, and here's just the side. Here's the facing of the side. See, it has the snaps. It has the inner facing. We are just sewing this part. And we see our marks up here. So we want to line up this mark with the mark on the other side. And this is absolutely a time you need a pin, because this is where this has to end up. And you're also going to take the seam allowance that go up here. You're going to open it up. So the seam allowance that goes to the outside is going to go with it. There we go. Now I don't need to pin any of this because when we're sewing, we're literally gonna sew to that center seam there where these two pieces come together. We're gonna sew from that seam, then we're gonna go all the way down to the bottom. So that we're gonna set that up on the other side too. Well, we're at it, and so you have a second chance to see that. So this is where our other piece goes. I'm gonna flip it over. That's the way we sew it. And then we take our pieces here, we open it up, we check that we have our marks. May not be the most visible to you, but it is there. And then we need our mark over here, which you see with our slit, but you can also see the mark you have. So we're gonna line that up, use a pin, and put it right on that mark, because those two marks need to be together. If you have seam allowance up here, I trimmed mine off obviously, you would open it, but because there's not really anything to speak of, don't worry about it. And when we sew, you're sewing from that seam line, this seam right here that connects the facing to the side. You're going to start at that seam and you're going to go all the way down to the bottom. So let's get those two sides attached and then work on the next step. Okay, you have your sides, which you can barely see. Wow, this fabric just makes everything blend in. It's pretty amazing, and also can hide a lot of stuff. So we have our sides here that are sewn to our top. We have those sides all the way sewn. We still have this facing loose, and now we need to flip this open. But there's something I need you to do at top while you're doing that. So these seam allowances here need to keep facing this way. But this one is going to go the opposite direction towards the center. So what you need to do is create that smooth transition. So I have it in my hands here. The top headrest is in my hand here, and this is the facing piece we just worked on. So everything is straight up. I want to hold the facings this way with my thumb, and then I'm going to just bring this down with my other hand. It will create this little fold on the headrest. It should be relatively smooth here. If you feel a big bulge, it's probably because the seam allowances got angry as you were doing this. So open it up, smooth out those seam allowances so they go up and down, and then make sure this is all the way up when you do that first fold. So all of these seam allowances are currently going this way. And then we're going to fold this down and over. So this is the only seam allowance going this way, and it's going to have this little diagonal part here. So this is actually the edge of the fabric where my finger is. And that allows it to transition its seam allowance to a new direction and keep this also really neat and clean so everything looks good. And then I am putting a clip in this so it doesn't move. Now we're going to do that again to this side. So we have those the way they need to be, and now we need to do some top stitching to make everything hold still. So it's going to be easier for me to show you from the front side, but I do want to demonstrate. The seam allowances are going to go this way. This goes over the top, and then there's going to be a line of stitching here on this part of the seam allowance, and it will hold this facing. So if any of this needs a press, that was a good time to do it. Run your iron from the inside to the outside so everything lays nice and neat, and then do a top stitch from the top here all the way down to the bottom on both sides. We are almost ready to attach the two sides to each other. We just have a little bit of top stitching left to do over in the snap area. I really had this theory that this would not be difficult to see, but I can tell that that's wrong. So I prefer to put a line of top stitching here, then do a nice curve along all these snaps, and then either go off the end or take a turn and go down. Let me see if we can see it on these. I can't really see it on there either, but it's at least somewhat apparent here. Then I take a curve that takes me down here, and here I decided to turn the corner and go straight down. And then while I'm top stitching, I actually attach these two layers to each other here so that in the next step, they don't move and everything just holds really still. So you may wish to use a piece of chalk to give yourself a line. Just be aware that the heads of the snaps are slightly bigger than the bottoms. You'll want to give your snaps a decent berth so that you can get a nice smooth line without the foot getting caught on there. So feel free to draw yourself a line wherever works to make it good for you. Both sides of the cover are finished, and now it's time to put them together. We're just gonna pop them on top of each other, and you're gonna sew across the top here along these edges. Then I'm gonna fold this back, which will be in a long line now, so it'll be both of these edges. I flip those back, I do my top stitching, and then I sew the bottom up to the point, and then we're gonna flip back the center and do top stitching along that. So let's get this all lined up and ready to sew. So remember, we have these pieces flipped back here. Don't try to push them out or anything. Let them stay flipped back because it's the same on both sides. So you'll want to line up the seam. And see, those sides actually line up perfectly like that. And then do clips or pins or whatever you're doing to help keep things lined up. You can also find the centers on this top curve so you have something else to line up. So lay them right on top of each other. If you're having a problem with either side bubbling, let's say one side is just kind of like sticking up, you'll want to find the centers and mark the center and ease in any of that extra that appeared. But if you're not, you can just be happy with what you have. So this will be sewn across the top. Go down to the side. You definitely want to make sure that this edge right where that seam is going to be is totally lined up so you have a nice finish. Sometimes curves can feel a little tricky to sew, and there's always a chance that one of your curves has stretched out of shape during everything. So the best idea is to just smooth everything down. If you need to find centers and work out from there because things got stretched, you totally can. So I have the whole thing clipped as far as I'm going to sew. Then I will do the fold back along these edges, top stitch them, and then we're going to sew the bottom up to our mark. We're going to start by sewing the top, and that's where this clip is holding everything together. But I need to point out that all of this fabric here, that's a lot. There is a huge chunk of fabric here, and we need to sew right next to it. Remember how we put these seam allowances towards the center and the other seam allowances towards the edge? Well, that was to eliminate as much as possible this bump, but it's still there. It's huge because there's a lot of fabric and a lot of seam allowances there. This is about as good as it gets. You're just gonna have to learn to work with it. So a couple of tools or concepts that may help is something like a Gina-majig or a hump jumper. This is just a pile of cardstock that has been glued together, and that will help keep your presser foot level when you're trying to have half of your presser foot on something that's big and half of your presser foot on something that's small. You need to add height to the back of your presser foot to help it stay level. If your presser foot is at an angle, that is the front is up and the back is down, it will be angry. It will not want to sew, and the stitches that it might be able to sew will not be nice. However, if the front of your presser foot is down and the back is up, which is actually pretty hard to do. It stays pretty level this way, just not that way. Your machine will be happy. The front can be angled down a little, but it cannot be uphill or it just won't work right. So we can use a couple of things to help us. One, we need to get this clip out of the way, but we also need to have everything stay still. So I'm just gonna jump past the clip and I'm gonna sew everything that I can and then deal with those last two ends once I'm done. Okay, I'm coming up on this clip here. I'm gonna pop it out of the way and line up everything the best that I can. And then I'm gonna see where everything's gonna line up. Now we have this edge that has been folded under, so we don't really have a great line to follow anymore. What I want you to know is you're basically aiming for right here, where all of these seams come together. That is our goal. I'm gonna turn it so you can see. So all those seams, you want this seam line that you're going to get right around here, right off the end. Now, obviously, you're not going to manage to get it literally right here, but as close as you can get, go for it. So we no longer have our edge guide because our seam allowances are folded back. So we need to use our eyeballs to figure out where to go. And as you can quickly see, this is going to try to head uphill because of all that seam allowance. And I'm going to go as far as I can. But now it's getting really stuck. It just can't move. So I'm going to stick my pieces of paper along the back of it, and suddenly it has the ability to move again because it's not facing as much stuff in the front here. And I'm just going to aim that as close to there as I can. When your thickness falls out because you've gone too far forward, just stick it back in. Once you go off the edge of the fabric, you do need to back stitch. It's very important because this part of the cover is going to get a lot of force because the strap's right there. So we're going to pull that out and see how close we got. You can totally make a couple attempts at getting closer. Let's see. It's not great, but it's not terrible. Let's open it up and see how that's going to look. So this is the headrest part, and this is the strap. And although I would love it to be closer to that corner, it's not terrible. All of this is finished in here because the fold back. So it doesn't look bad. It just could be closer if we can do it. Cool. Okay. And now the other edge, we haven't tried to get close to there yet. So let's go back there, and then I'll talk about a couple of things you can do to try to get closer. So I just stuck on a zipper foot, and a zipper foot allows you to get really close to the edge of things. And so this zipper foot here allows me to get really close to the edge of there. And then I can just line it up with the stitches that already are there. Do a quick tie off or a back stitch if your machine doesn't have a tie off. Now let's see what that looked like, because that looked like it got right in the right spot. Look at that. That is probably as close to perfect as we can manage. Awesome. So that was the hardest part, doing this top and getting into those corners. Now let's do the rest. And that'll be easy. What we need to do with this seam before we flip everything right side out is to clip it, because it is a curve. We clip that so when it turns the other way, everything sits nicely. And the same thing for this curve up here. So this is the curved side, and this is the waistband area. I'm going to open this up, take those seam allowances, push them open, and then fold back that edge. It needs to be folded back 3/8 of an inch or a centimeter, but I know that my serging is 1/4 of an inch wide, which means I need 1/8 of an inch over here to make the whole turn back equal a centimeter. So I don't need to get out my ruler or anything else. That works for me. So I have top stitched both sides here in their respective colors, which is why you can't see it. And then I have sewn the bottom from the edge up until that mark, which is pretty much impossible to see on camera. How exciting. Well, I'm going to slide my finger through. There you go, that little blue mark there. So now that I have done this on both sides, also sewn up to my mark here, I have this center. This center is going to get folded down on either side and top stitched so that from the outside you don't see any of the raw edges or any of the serging. If you have not done any edge finishing so far, you may want to at least do an edge finish right here, whether it's a faux serge or a zigzag. You can also do 2 tiny folds. So fold it a little bit and then fold it again so that this is completely hidden. The center has an optional snap. If you are putting that snap in, you're gonna need to reinforce right around this area. So you might want to stick a piece of fabric here and then fold down so that that fabric kind of gets stuck down with this edge being sewn. You can also stick a piece of interfacing or anything else that works for you. But if a snap is going there, it's gonna need some reinforcement. So now I'm gonna do these edges. Okay, our whole slipcover is sewn and it's time for the reveal. Let's do our quick checks just to make sure we haven't forgotten anything. Top, sewn. Side curves, sewn. Ends not sewn, but turned back and top stitched. Bottom sewn to the points. Center turned back and top stitched. I've already put my snaps in. If you haven't, you can totally do it now or wait still a little bit longer. Then we need to check our clipping. Anywhere there's a curve, we need clips or notches. We have clips all along here, all of the curves. This is straight, so it doesn't really need it. Curves here. So both these have clips, both these have clips. Now let's talk about the top. Technically it's a curve, right? But this is a curve outward and it's pretty straight. I mean, it's not a big curve. So if you want to do any clipping, you can do a couple of triangles right on like the most curved areas. But I'm not totally convinced that this seam really needs any clipping or notching. These are notches. But because I like teaching you how to do everything, quote, the proper way, I've now shown you how to notch that. So clips, notches, snaps, top stitching, we're good to go. The big reveal. One side, the other side. So all this needs is a bit of press to get all these nice and neat along the edges and the top edge, and then it'll look really darn good in just a minute of pressing. Remember, there are snaps here and here. Do not press on top of those snaps. They will melt. If any part of this curve doesn't really want to pull out nicely, that may be because you need to clip the seam a bit more. If it's pulling, it's telling you, I need help. I'm not ironing over the snaps, I swear. Your zipper is at least somewhat protected because of all the fabric around it, but still, don't stay on your zipper for a super long time. Well, that's the slipcover, all ready to go on your carrier. Let's put it on. join me over at the Fabric Ninja Sewing Circle, which is a group on Facebook that you can join and show me what you make. We also offer support if you have any questions. We're always there to help. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Alice, the Fabric Ninja. If you like this video, you know what to do. Happy sewing. And my needle has decided to track with my magnetized scissors. After you've been sewing for long enough, it seems like everything is slightly magnetized.